If you have ever looked through social media posts in the moments right before the onset of sleep, or in the moments just after waking up, you are not alone. Probably most of us have done so at least once in our lives. The uniqueness of social media is that various platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so on need not to advertise themselves to grab our attention. We advertise ourselves on them. It is harder to acquire skills such as swimming or riding a bicycle than it is to learn the basics of social media. It is as if it is tailor-made for us. We have outsourced our mind to our smartphones and tablets, and the mind runs externally on those devices. We use the mind in two broad ways. One is for creation of content, and the other for its consumption. In the days before the viral spread of social media, we frequently exercised the mind through creativity and personal exploration. In those days, there were more people engaged in the creation of their own happiness using the mind than there are today. Nowadays, there is no great need to be creative. It is delivered to the screens in our hands and tailor-made to our tastes. We are predominantly consumers, and the creative spark smolders somewhere deep inside, at risk for being extinguished for good. The balance tips towards addiction to social media when we are pure consumers of content without exercising the mind's innate creativity. Just as the body becomes flabby and heavy when we don't exercise or eat right, the mind also gets out of shape if it is not exercised or fed the right content. In all probability, we will be in agreement on the statement that consuming social media content is not considered as an exercise for the mind. It is indulging the mind and allowing it to get out of shape. The mind will lose its sharpness as it becomes less creative, and when the mind cannot stand on its own without external support from social media, such a mind is on virtual life support. Take away access to social media for a week or even one day, and the gravity of the statement, the mind on virtual life support, may start to make more sense. Exercising the mind involves flexing our attention on a particular thought through concentration. Concentration comes easy when we have a screen in our hands, but concentrating on the mental screen has become more difficult. One way to trick the mind is to look at social media, take some posts that we may like, and then close our eyes and try to recreate that post internally through visualization. Imagine that the screen of the mind is shaped like a cell phone, and imagine that you're browsing through social media on that screen. On such a screen, let your imagination run wild and create whatever posts that you would like. Scroll through as many and for as long as you like. While doing this, it's important that you also visualize the outline of the smartphone on the mind screen. The contents which show up on the screen can change quickly or slowly, as long as they're contained within that stationary outline of that imaginary smartphone that we projected onto the screen of the mind. We can keep coming back to this exercise in mental concentration as many times as we like. Just as we don't keep changing the model of our smartphone on a daily basis, the imaginary cell phone we visualize in the mind should also appear the same each time we perform this mental exercise. This is an important aspect of this exercise. We can use the power of visualization to recreate the same phone on the screen of the mind each time. The contrast of the unchanging outline of the smartphone and the changing contents on the screen of that imaginary smartphone will be an entirely new experience in the mind. It gives us a different perspective of the mind, a static image holding dynamic changing content. We're not used to this. We're not doing anything new here. We are used to having a static phone in our hands whose screen comes alive with content. We are simply transferring this onto the screen of the mind using the power of visualization. By doing this exercise, the mind will not miss interaction with social media as much as before. Instead of using the internet, we're using the internal net of the subconscious mind to project images on the screen of the mind. We will achieve two things with such an exercise. Number one, we reduce social media consumption, and hence we stop adding information to the mind, which will ultimately settle into the subconscious mind. More importantly, we begin the process of purging the subconscious mind by allowing the mind to recreate images and experiences in a format that is friendly to the mind. Just as we should ease into any exercise routine, slowly and methodically, the mind should also be approached with caution. After all, it is very flighty and it may wander away with the slightest exertion we impose on it. Using social media as a prop for improving our concentration through internal visualization will be less threatening to the mind. While the mind remains engaged on what it's familiar with, we get what we want, which is freedom from linking our happiness to social media. The latent creative spark will light a flame within us. Just as we cannot keep exercising our body without offering it relaxation to help it rejuvenate and recover, the mind also needs relaxation. We associate relaxation with social media interaction. That is not real mental relaxation. Relaxing the mind involves giving time for our thoughts to settle down on their own. Social media does little or nothing to help settle our thoughts. In fact, it does the opposite. It can trigger raw and primal emotions within, and it stirs up the pot of thoughts within our conscious mind. Imagine a glass full of water that is muddy. When we agitate water in such a glass, the water turns opaque. If we allow the glass to sit, the heavier residue of mud will settle down and the water will start to appear clear. Now, if we carefully pour the water into another glass, leaving behind the residue of mud that has settled on the bottom, the water may appear clear, but it might still have some residue of mud within it. And when this glass is allowed to sit for a while longer, finer particles of mud will settle down, making the water clearer yet again. By repeating this over and over again, the water will eventually be cleared of all visible residue and appear transparent. Let's apply this example to the mind. To empty the mind of residue related to social media, this active relaxation technique might help. You don't need a phone or an app for this. You don't even need to visualize the form of a smartphone in the mind like we did in the previous exercise. All that it takes is for us to bring our awareness to the mind space. Like a fast-paced action movie, thoughts will be energetically darting back and forth across the screen of the mind. Let them run wild while we relax into the comfortable seat of our awareness of them. As long as we're aware that we're watching the mind, that may be enough. No need to concentrate on a particular thought or an idea or a concept. This will help the mind relax. Just like the glass full of muddy water, thoughts will begin to settle once we stop active involvement with their movement. After a period of time, the mind space will clear up, and imagine that all the thoughts that were once on the screen of the mind have now settled to the bottom. The clear mind space is just like the water that has cleared up by simply letting it stand. That transparent clarity in the mind may last for a short time initially, but enjoy the clarity without projecting anything else onto it, and enjoy it while it lasts. Because soon enough the mind will fill itself up with more thoughts and become murky again. We can repeat this exercise when that happens. In both these exercises, concentration and relaxation, it's important to keep our focus on the process and not the result. The mind is in continuous movement. We are in effect moving our awareness upstream from the screen of our smartphone to the screen of the mind and finally regaining control over our own power of awareness. By doing this, we are gradually unplugging ourselves from the ills of social media. We can then use a mind and power of awareness to direct creativity into the world. Simultaneously, we can also create our own social network amongst our thoughts, and then we can finally be in charge of the conversation in our own mind.